Yeah, we'll just transition right into the Eggers versus Peele versus Aster. And I say versus more as just a communication thing, not actually. I mean, we'll discuss who we like more, but these three are kind of the figureheads of modern horror filmmaking right now in terms of the ones coming out with the most interesting projects in general. And they're kind of the big three in terms of what people mostly are talking about in the horror space post 2015. I think of the three people's filmography, Robert Eggers was the first with The Witch. But yeah, let's just jump into it. We're not going to review each film from each of them, but we're kind of discuss their filmographies. Who do we like the most? You know, kind of what we think about each filmmaker in general. But let's just start off with Eggers, since we've been talking about him. We've been mentioning like, oh, we'll save that for the Eggers portion. Let's just start with Eggers. So 2015, he came out with The Witch. And then he followed that up in 2019 with The Lighthouse, starring Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, which is also another horror thriller. And then The Northman in 2022, last year, with Alexander Skarsgård, reunited with Willem Dafoe again from The Lighthouse, and Anya Taylor-Joy from The Witch. And this was, I mean, there's like horror undertones, but mostly this is a Norse adventure action movie. So not really a horror, but there's still like a lot of, you know, historical Norse lore that could be considered, you know, more horror thematic elements that are still definitely involved in there. So those are the three films he's had on IMDb. 7.4 for The Lighthouse, and then The Northman and The Witch are at 7. So kind of like, I don't know. The thing is interesting that when you guys were mentioning The Lighthouse versus The Witch, talking about it so much, comparing the two, I don't get why The Lighthouse is reviewed so much better, when to me, like, I haven't seen The Lighthouse in a while. Like, I feel like they're both the equal amount of like obscureness and weirdness and deeply thematic that like I don't get why one is so much favored over the other.
I agree. I actually think The Lighthouse is weirder than The Witch. The Lighthouse is a lot more going on.
I think
is it just Rob Pat? Like, is that?
I think The Witch is like
maybe
way more accessible than The Lighthouse. Like, I would never recommend The Witch, 50 feet, The Lighthouse. Like, yeah, I would never recommend The Lighthouse to like one of my like casual movie going friends, but I would The Witch. So it's very odd to see that like The Lighthouse is like the more the better reviewed film
on like
of
everything
the two.
on Letterboxd as well. I think, as well as
but then I guess you could look at it from the lens that there are a lot of like the minute you bring in religion into something, it becomes just this incredibly polarizing film, because obviously there are a lot of people that take religion very seriously, and if there's any even hint of, you know, a negative portrayal of religion in your film, you know, you're in hot water. You know, you're at risk of being review bombed immediately. And that's not to say that The Lighthouse doesn't have any religious undertone, because it does. But maybe The Witch is just a more in your face, and then obviously that ending is a more, you know, I guess very anti-church type of ending, where it's like the woman breaking free from, like you said, Seth, this patriarchal society. And I guess it's like an interesting play on Adam and Eve and these messianic figures. So once you bring in religion, if there's any like hint of, you know, a negative portrayal of the Bible or of these stories, I feel like you're at risk of just being either one, review bombed, or two, just a box office flop that no one wants to go see.
I remember watching when I came out of The Northman. I wanted to see that, like, what was it, March, April time?
It was like early 2022, yeah.
No,
The Northman, the Northbog. I thought
The Northman, early 2022.
I thought you said The
like
Lighthouse.
March,
that's why I said 2019.
Yeah, so when I came out of The Northman, I remember like the first thing I said to Anna was like, "This is Eggers. This is his accessible film." You know, not that there's not a lot going on, because there certainly is. But I think as far as it goes, like a Norse epic, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of shocking sequences, but nothing that's. It's difficult.
There's a lot of Willem Dafoe dick.
That's fucking weird. See, and yeah, I mean the cast as well. You know, you've got Ethan Hawke at the start. You've got Skarsgård, Anya Taylor-Joy. You've got Nicole Kidman. You've got what's his fucking name, Willem Dafoe, etc. So, and I remember just thinking, because this is like a Norse epic. You know, visually it's beautiful. You know, you got people talking about the end is like a really huge epic battle sequence. You got people. I thought that was going to be like his most accessible, but it seems that not accessible, but his most popular, I guess, because of the themes and because it's a lot easier to handle, and because for most people it's not a horror, it's not a thriller. You know, you're not in this. It's not a folk horror with religious themes, and it's not a weird and wacky thriller with fucking so much going on. So I thought, that's going to be his most popular, and it turned out kind of the opposite, because I think The Northman didn't if I'm remembering correctly, didn't do too well when it comes to numbers, did it? I don't.
A lot
think.
of
I
like
think it did
mainstream
bad.
movie watchers. I'm not saying that derogatorily. I'm saying that just people in general, just like watching only a few movies a year. A lot of people were bored with The Northman. They said it was like very boring, slow, not an exciting. Like from the trailers, they expected it to be like a bloody, vengeful.
Exactly.
Movie,
that's a bunch of
leading up to that.
Yeah, that's general audience members. Again, not derogatory, but a lot of people that aren't familiar with like Robert Eggers' artistic point of view when he's making a film. And in fairness, the Northman trailers did come off very, Viking epic, not Viking. What's the word I'm looking for?
No, I think Viking worked. Nordic,
they just came off very like this epic film, but in reality, it's a Robert Eggers film. So there's a lot of like artistic flair to it that I think a lot of people didn't expect. I think that's what explains. I just looked at it, the 64% audience score on Rotten Tomato compared to the 90% critic score.
Mm-hmm. I think The Northman, like Seth said, I 100% agree. It's the most accessible film from him, but I'm not saying it's like the most accessible film period. Because especially like if there's a movie that's on TV, if you don't you got to make it through the first 20 minutes for it to become like accessible. I think the first, like, especially the beginning of the movie is super weird, wacky when they're kind of in those huts and doing all like the Nordic chants.
The Willem Dafoe shit.
Like shit. Like if you, I think if like a dad turned this on halfway through the movie, they'd watch it and be like, oh, this is like a fun little Viking movie. They start at the beginning, they'd turn it off after 15 minutes and be like, this is weird stuff. I don't really
it's not. I mean, it's Robert Eggers. It's not accessible, but I think out of the three, it does surprise me that it's that it's a lot more.
This is just completely unrelated, but my favorite Letterboxd review is the number one Letterboxd review for The Northman. It said, men will literally avenge their father, save their mother, and kill Fjolnir before going to therapy.
Yeah, but
I've seen that one, actually.
I think the trailer just set it up for failure in terms of like.
I don't remember the trailer, to be honest.
I just remember the trailer was him rowing the boat and like doing that same. I can't remember the exact words. It's been a while since I've seen it, but he says that same thing throughout the movie, like, "I'll avenge my father, I'll avenge you, brother or mother, or whatever." Yeah, and it's like him chanting that, and then like it leads up to like the final battle. But it's like even before he's like rowing on the boat, like starting that mission, like it's a lot of the movie goes by before then. Yeah, but I don't know. I really dug The Northman. It's my favorite Eggers by a good margin. Again, I like all his movies. I really liked it. The production design in all his films are incredible, but first two are a lot more one location. Well, they literally are basically one location in all intents and purposes for The Witch and The Lighthouse, whereas The Northman obviously is an epic that crosses countries, maybe continents. Like it's massive scale, and the studio knew that. That's why they made a theatrical trailer that made it look like an action adventure, like epic movie.
It was a different release.
Eggers movie. I think they were hoping this was going to be a big box office win.
Because it's like a lot of people, I'm assuming what the studio thought is, the reception on The Witch and The Lighthouse in general were really positive. So it's, let's give him, a bit bigger of a budget and make a kind of huge scale epic, but make something which can come off as accessible. So you've got like a Norse Viking period, which, a lot of people will flood to if they see it on a trailer, but didn't really work out. But for me, I think so. Robert Eggers, onto the conversation we said earlier, Robert Eggers is my favorite of the three,
right?
Just because it's, for me, is like perfect, because I love the time periods he goes to. I love his flair, artistic style, and I love the themes he puts in films. And I mean, not to mention, like, Nosferatu is probably one of my most anticipated films, maybe ever. I think he is the perfect director to direct something like that, and I think the things he tackles are just so in line with my taste. It's crazy. But yeah, so Robert Eggers is definitely my favorite of the three, anyway.
Yeah, so I guess we'll kind of go into Peele's filmography now, and then kind of at the end, I know Seth just mentioned it, but we'll kind of go over our overall rankings and comparisons of them. But I think we'll just go kind of through each person individually. So Jordan Peele, also 3 movies. Everyone kind of knew him from Key and Peele prior to this, but he's obviously a big.
I actually didn't. I didn't really know what that was, to be honest.
Really?
Get out.
Maybe it's more of an American thing. I don't know. I definitely knew him from Key and Peele. But yeah, so 2017, he had his debut, which is incredibly impressive, Get Out. And then in 2019, he followed that up with Us. And then in 2022, Nope. And then it says on IMDb, I guess 2024 is an untitled 4th film, because I remember us covering like a year ago that he lost the bid to, I can't remember the director actually. When he like fired his manager and he was like throwing a fit because he's like, I needed that script and you just screwed me over here.
What was it now? Yeah, I do remember.
I can't remember the movie or who the director was that got it, but he was very pissed off about that. But so Get Out, Us, and Nope. I'll start off the conversation right here with saying I think he's the most accessible director of the 3, and I feel like that's not a hot take. Like, I feel like
easily
the most successful. or accessible. I mean, in terms of, and I could recommend any of those movies, even though like I don't love like Us as much as the other two, or even Nope that much compared to Get Out. But you could recommend any of those three, and then anyone can watch it and be like, yeah, I either liked it or I didn't. But they're not going to be like, that was weird, I'm put off by it. You know, they're very accessible films. He doesn't really go as weird as the other two.
No, but he's I mean, he's still, you know, not accessible in the general from, because he has a lot going on. Peele has got a lot going on in his head that he puts in his films, but his films work the best for a general audience. Like, I mean, Anna is the perfect example. She's watched a film from each of the directors. She watched Midsummer from Aster, Get Out and Us from Peele, and The Northman from Eggers, and she definitely took significantly the most from Get Out. I mean, that kind of goes with the film's quality, because most people do. Get Out, well, for me, is one of the best directorial debuts of this century, but it is very much a thing that it's kind of exciting, it's thrilling, but there's a lot you can take from it that's understandable as well. You know, if you got one of your friends who doesn't really watch films in general to watch like fucking Beau is Afraid, you know, they'd be like, what the fuck?
They'd be like, don't ever recommend me a movie again.
They would unfriend you.
Because like Beau is Afraid, or like maybe even like, you know, if you got someone who's really not just crazy new in cinema, perhaps this isn't looking down on them, but someone who exclusively watching like franchise films, they have them as a little kid. If you even put the Lighthouse on them, they'd be like, what the fuck is this? Do you know what I mean? Whereas Get Out is one where it's accessible, but there's also a lot going on, which is why it works entwined perfectly with an audience member. So yeah, Peele definitely the most accessible by far.
He's my favorite of the three for sure.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to it. I think Ari Aster, in my opinion, is the only one with a miss in Men. I don't think Eggers.
You mean Beau is Afraid? Men is Alex Garland.
Oh fuck.
Yeah.
Am I losing? I'm losing my mind. I'm so sorry.
Men was a miss though, but
Men absolutely
we've just
super miss, no doubt. But okay, then
sorry,
none
Alex.
of them have missed. But I guess if we're including Beau is Afraid, then which we obviously are including Beau is Afraid, then yes, Ari Aster is still my third of the three, just because he made Beau is Afraid, which I think is the worst of the 9 films. But yeah, Jordan Peele not only is the most accessible, but he is my favorite of the three. I like Nope. It seems a great deal more than most. I love that. Jordan Peele, across all of his movies, I think has just this awesome way of like calling back to like such classic films of the past and just adding like this modern flair to it, especially in the sense of Nope. There's so much, there's so many callbacks to like Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and again, he's just adding this new modern flair for like, you know, this new audience of horror lovers, which I absolutely adore. And then I've said it time and time again, I think Get Out is one of, if not the greatest horror screenplay ever written, one of the greatest screenplays just in general ever written. For a directorial debut, I think that's like one of the craziest feats in filmmaking that we've ever seen. Us is still a 4.5 out of 5 for me. It's the one I find myself rewatching the least, but I still do enjoy it a lot. Again, I just think he has just this very interesting and unique way of telling these very profound stories. And Us, I think, displays that the best between the three. But yeah, Peele is my favorite of the three. 4 if we're including Alex Garland now.
For Jordan Peele, I actually I rate it positively in terms of it's like a 6.7 out of 10, but I didn't really care for Us. When the movie ended, I was a little bummed out. Like I felt like it left a lot unanswered that I don't think was like a meaningful non-answer to it. I feel like he wrapped things up that I just didn't love the way it ended. And I don't know, Us was underwhelming. Although I will say for me, like it was clearly like the scariest for me of the 3 movies Peele has done in terms of like true horror elements.
I would say that's
more
like
thriller.
the
Nope
true
sci-fi.
horror.
That's a true horror. Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially like the scenes where the little girls like in like the maze and stuff. Like there's so much tension and dread in those scenes. Cool. Yeah. But yeah, it's a cool, interesting little movie. With some incredible acting performances that are just like breathtaking to watch. Is it Lupita Nyong'o who's the main woman who doesn't have her voice? Super cool how they kind of tie that story in, but I just didn't care for Us in general. Like it's just like a fine movie. Nope, 8.3 out of 10 for me. So I did really like it, but again, I was a little bumped out when it ended. I was just kind of like a little like the tiniest of tiny feelings of being like, oh, that was it. but very, because obviously 8.3 is a very, very good score. So I still very much loved it. And Get Out, of the three directors, is my favorite film of any of them. So I think Get Out is a true masterpiece. Whereas Nope is kind of in the middle, and Us has kind of bummed me out. But I'm interested, Seth, your kind of opinion on the three movies.
Yeah, so Nope, I like. I didn't. To be fair, Nope is one I've only seen once, and I think that will improve. I give it a 3.5. I thought it was cool. Jordan Peele's in a really unique position where I don't know if he'll ever be able to meet the feat of his first. And I set my expectations way too high with him just because of my love for Get Out and how many times I've watched it. But I think Nope tries to tackle a lot. Some worked for me, some didn't. Same with Us as well. So as I also have a 3.5, both from 3.5. I like both of them. I enjoy both of them, but nothing I love there, apart from obviously a few moments, of course. And I think with Jordan Peele, you always get something interesting, something to start a conversation out of, and he always puts a lot into his films. But Get Out for me is like a true, like, I guess in a sense, modern masterpiece. I think it's that good. I think it works in every element. I think Jordan Peele truly, the screenplay that George mentioned is fucking genius in that film. And I've probably watched it. I would say I've watched Get Out probably at least 5 to 10 times, maybe more. And it seems to get better continuously, which is not something you can say for a lot of directors. So yeah, Nope and Us, I have a 3.5. I enjoy both of them, don't love both of them. And Get Out is like by far and away his best for me. It's a 5-star, and I probably, to be fair, at the end, I think I've got my ranking right now in my head of like all directors, so all 9 films. I think I can do it. So I'll probably say that at the end. I'll leave that to the end.
Yeah, I'll do that at the end as well. I have them all ranked right here. But yeah, anything else you want to say on Jordan Peele before we kind of get into Ari Aster?
No, it seems cool.
Sorry, hold on.
How old is Jordan Peele?
Yeah, keep talking real quick.
42. I just made that up.
He's 42.
Let's see how far off I am. I literally made that up.
I think
he has a lot of gray. He might be older. Jordan
Peele,
Peele,
I'd say early 40s. I'm saying early 40s.
44. So we were both close.
Wow.
Close.
But he's got time though. Like he's got a lot of time.
This says upcoming movie from him is Blade, but I feel like that's wrong on Google.
That Blade is absolutely wrong.
If you literally Google Jordan Peele, if you Google Jordan Peele, and just like the top thing is an upcoming movie, Blade. I'm like,
have you guys ever like looked at Google, like looked at some of the casts? Sometimes they're so off. Like if you search like The Godfather, it comes up with like Robert De Niro as one of the
I was just gonna say sometimes like, you look up the cast, it'll just be like in a franchise. You look up like Scream 2 cast, it'll just be like every person ever been in Scream.
In the whole
like Jenna Ortega was in a movie in 1998. I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
George, do you need us to buy more time? What are you trying to look
No, you're good. So the script that Jordan Peele wanted sold for $38 million, which in the horror world, I guess, is just a ridiculous amount.
It's quite a lot for a horror film. Just for the script.
Yeah. So it's a screenplay by Zach Kreger, who I believe
he did
Barbarian.
He did Barbarian.
Yeah. He did Barbarian, and now he's also. So this is the part that I think I'm confused on. Why was the script sold for $38 million, but he's the one that's going to be directing it? So like, who did he sell it to himself?
Sold the rights? I don't fucking know.
They need to.
Yeah,
maybe
I remember. I mean, we talked about it on like ReelTok episode 3.
Yeah, we took that a long time ago.
I do remember speaking about this. Yeah.
It's called Weapons, and it was
so it was sold to New Line, and then for $38 million, including the budget and Zach Kreger. So the deal included him. I thought we didn't do that
sell
anymore.
himself like that? That's
crazy. I thought getting $5 million to direct and $10 million total on the budget.
Okay, so I think what it probably was Zach Kreger set out to write a screenplay, and I'm sure there's some contractual thing with that. Like in our mind, we think, oh, you write a screenplay like it's yours, but I'm sure it's like maybe through a studio that funded his time to write it, and then it goes up for auction. And there's like Jordan Peele wanted to buy it and direct it himself, but then New Line Cinema or whoever that company is bought it and was like, yeah, you can come in and direct it. But it's kind of like, it's almost sounded like Jordan Peele, not stealing it away because it was all above board, but he liked the script so much that he's like, I wanted to direct this. I don't want Zach Kreger to, but Zach Kreger, I mean, he's acclaimed. Barbarian did well, but I don't think his net worth is 38 million, enough to throw away 38 million to outbid Jordan Peele on his own. So yeah, it sounds like, interesting though. But I mean, we'll see how that goes. But
I should have placed a bid for that movie.
Yeah, that's how much you're rolling in these days. ReelTok Patreon in the description down below. Go check out all our perks. We're going to try and purchase some scripts to horror movies so that we can start directing ourselves, as we talked about on our Q&A episode. But we'll get into Ari Aster now. He's come out with 3 films as well: 2018 Hereditary, Midsummer in 2019, and Beau is Afraid in 2023. So he has the most condensed career of them all in terms of all his movies came out the most recently and kind of back to back. But yeah, so obviously Hereditary was a massive horror success that kind of took the world by storm. Midsummer, more divisive. Like Hereditary is obviously divisive. Everyone we're talking about here for these directors and their movies, they're all divisive to an extent. For the movies individually, Jordan Peele the least so, I would say. But Hereditary came out, and then Midsummer was followed up a year after, which definitely was more polarizing. Although I definitely know a lot of people who like it more than Hereditary. But on average, the Hereditary scores are higher. And then Beau is Afraid coming out this year, which was a massive box office flop, but also was like massively divisive, which I'd say probably it has to be his most divisive movie that he's come out with. Even though all of them are divisive to an extent.
It definitely is. I'd say that Ari Aster is like he's a filmmaker that I appreciate more than I like in general. I think why I appreciate him so much is he is so self-indulgent. He makes films for himself, and he doesn't give a fuck if you like them or not. And I really appreciate that. I think it's kind of like it's not a comparison in the slightest, but like Wes Anderson, he really leans into his style, his formula. If you don't like it, you don't like it. He doesn't really care. And I do appreciate that about him. I am very, very high on Hereditary. Like very high. I have like a 4.5. I think Hereditary is fantastic. I think it's one of the best modern horrors, which obviously we'll go into later on in this episode. I think Midsummer is every watch it gets worse for me. I'll be honest. It's like a 3 now.
I'm the same way. Yeah. Not
although I will say,
but it's getting worse on rewatches for me.
I will say though, I had a conversation with Chris a few weeks ago, Movies or Therapy, and he said that the director's cut is meant to be a lot better.
Yeah,
a lot of people say that. So I was like, okay,
it's been released in theaters this month for anyone in America. Just to know the director's cut of Midsummer.
America. Yeah, you got The Witch in theater as well. It's crazy. I'd fucking die for that one. Yeah, and then Midsummer I think is okay. I like 3. Beau is Afraid, same sort of thing. Beau is Afraid was a weird one though, because Midsummer I kind of like a lot of it, then don't, and like a lot of them don't. Beau is Afraid is like I love the first hour and a half of that film. I think it's fantastic. Last hour and a half, didn't like it at all. As soon as the kind of stage play went, I tuned out of that. So I think Ari Aster is a director I really appreciate because he's so self-indulgent. He doesn't care if you don't like his film. He makes films for him, which I really like. I also, just to mention, I don't like his he did a short film which is very polarized called The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. If you guys have heard of it, it's on Letterboxd. I think it's horrible, but let you be the judge. It's on YouTube. At least just a bad film. But yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I like all his films, I guess, because 2 3s and a 4.5. But Hereditary for me is like Get Out was for Jordan Peele, but even more so, just far and away his best work. But I'm always going to watch his films because they're so weird, technical marvels, offer a lot in terms of commentary. So I'm always going to watch them, but I don't. I haven't loved his last 2. I'll say that, for certain anyway.
Yeah, George, what are your thoughts on his films?
I think I'm a little higher on Midsummer than you guys are. I've only seen it twice, and again, I haven't seen that one in probably like a year or so. But I think that's like another folk horror movie that I just find myself really attached to. Hereditary is top 5 for me all time, not even modern horror.
All-time horror.
All-time horror.
Shit,
I think that's one of those movies that has legitimately made me lose sleep. And I feel like I've said this all the time, like not even trying to be manly. Like it takes a lot to like frighten me to the point of like losing sleep. Hereditary had like multiple scenes and multiple like so much imagery that just stuck in my head forever. And then obviously I think so highly of Toni Collette, and I think she put on one of the greatest performances of all time, not only in a horror movie. Beau is Afraid, I kind of have the same thoughts as you, Seth, where first hour and a half I was loving so much. Like I was sitting in theaters and I'm like, this is gonna rival Hereditary for me if it continues this way. And then, like you said, everything from the play scene on just kind of falls off the rails for me. But I do, like you said again, Seth, I do adore that Ari Aster just makes movies for himself. He has a vision. He's going to put that vision to screen. Doesn't matter if his movie is an hour and a half or 4 hours long, no matter how long it takes to tell a story, no matter how weird he needs to be to tell this story, to to express his vision, he's going to do it. He's going to go there. And I think very few filmmakers these days are that ambitious about their projects. So that's one thing I absolutely adore about Ari Aster. If I were to say his films between the three filmmakers we've discussed are the least accessible, what would you say to me?
I personally think Ari Aster's the least accessible.
Yeah, I think he's the least accessible, especially with both.
Actually,
I mean,
far behind.
For me, it's him and Eggers. I think, like we've said, I think Jordan Peele is the most accessible of the three. But I think when you look at his filmography between Hereditary and Midsommar, just two overly graphic, overly horrific movies with some imagery that'll just be ingrained in your head forever. And then you have Beau is Afraid, which is just this, almost 3-hour just nightmare panic attack. So I think from that perspective, it's just a little less accessible for like a general audience member. And again, not a derogatory term. But yeah, I think yeah, go.
I think he's like I'm trying to think. I'd say Midsommar and Hereditary, they're not like accessible, to the general audience, but they're more accessible for me than like probably The Lighthouse and The Witch. For me, if you took at all three directors, I'd say the least accessible ones would probably be Beau is Afraid, absolutely, The Lighthouse and The Witch. So I'd say Ari Aster and Rob Eggers are very, very much less accessible than Peele, for example. But yeah, I'd probably say Hereditary is a weird one because there's a lot going on, but I think it's quite obvious what he's trying to portray. Not in a bad way. I think Hereditary is amazing. Midsommar is a bit different. Midsommar is obviously less accessible, and Beau is Afraid like really just drives out of the water, and that's kind of why I admire Beau is Afraid. And I am keen to rewatch it because obviously, like Tyler, I think Tyler gave it like a 3 on first watch, and then you bumped it up to like a 4, I think, on second watch. So I do think that will really pick up for me because there's so much going on. That's kind of why I admire him so much, because he put so much into that film. And it's funny. Do you guys think that like his next one will be even fucking weirder? Do you know what I mean?
It's a Western, so I mean,
oh shit, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
That's why to me, Robert, and I know I have a comment, but I'm gonna save it for when we compare all the three directors. But Aster alone, is focusing on him. Yeah, Beau is Afraid was like the lowest of all three of them for me when I first saw it, and then I rewatched it, and there's obviously the big like rug pull at the end when you finally figure out what's all going on in Beau is Afraid. And then once you rewatch it, like so much of it is not obvious, but there's so many hints and so subtle. And I'm like, wow, this is actually way more. Because at first I thought I was like, I was like, oh, this is very self-indulgent. But beyond that, I was like, this is very on the nose, like not that subtle. But then when I rewatched, I was like, oh, this is actually really subtly like more masterful than I gave it credit for. And I definitely prefer it to Hereditary at this point, or Midsommar at this point, because Midsommar has just kind of been dropping off for me a bit. But Hereditary is my favorite of the bunch. Easily by far the most scary of all 9 of the movies from these three directors. Like in terms of like a true horror, scary movie, Hereditary is easily number 1 for that. But Midsommar is definitely like more like a paranoia fueled thriller, which is also kind of Beau is Afraid too. Very heavy on paranoia. But yeah, I don't know. I really like all three of his films. Like they're all kind of neck and neck for me, with Hereditary being the standout, but they're all up there. Like they're all 4.5s for me. We'll see. I want to rewatch Hereditary, but also don't want to rewatch Hereditary. Freaking spooky ass movie. But yeah, I really like Ari Aster. I think he's just such an interesting filmmaker. And I just love that he, like George mentioned, he makes movies he wants to make and he doesn't care about the reception. Like after he dropped Hereditary, he could easily, it elevated him in such a limelight. He could have just continued making, A24-ish style horror movies and continue riding that success wave. But Midsommar is very different than Hereditary. Beau is Afraid is on a different continent and a different planet than the other two.
It's Midsommar.
And I was going for a Western.
They're all like 24, right?
Yeah, actually all three are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
whereas The Northman is not for Eggers, but the other two are, and none of Peele's are A24.
Yes.
But The Witch and The Lighthouse are. So I really like Aster. I'm very excited when he has a new movie coming out because I'm like, what the hell is he going to make this time? But yeah, I don't know. I'm ready to get into comparing the three. If you guys don't have anything else on Aster.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the one thing for me is like, I think Aster and we talked about, obviously, I think everyone will agree that Peele is the most accessible out of the three, and the other two are kind of like on a different level in terms of not being as accessible. But I also think in terms of being just interesting, like to me, Eggers and Aster are on such a different level than Peele in terms of like interesting directors that I'm like interested to see where they go with it. I don't know how to best articulate it, but I feel like in terms of making like interesting films with like Peele has a ton of deeper meanings in his film. Don't get me wrong, but I'm so much more interested to see the minds of Eggers and Aster than I am Peele, even though I think Peele on the flip side is probably the most I'm excited to see in quotes in theaters, because I'm like the most confident it's going to be like a digestible thriller horror that I'm probably going to enjoy, where the other two I have to go in with a little bit of like how wacky and wild is going to be. But I think in terms of being an interesting filmmaker, I think that those two are like on a different level than Peele for me personally, which I think is a hot take because I think a lot of people obviously love Jordan Peele, but I think the other two are just so much more interesting as filmmakers than Peele is.
I think
we're
Peele's
all
great.
gonna have
I'm not derogatory to Peele.
outside of Get Out, I don't think we would talk about a Jordan Peele as long as we just talked about like The Witch, or as long as we would talk about, you know, Hereditary or Beau is Afraid if we were to do a deep dive.
We should do films. Patrons, if you're listening, do Get Out. I'd like
do Hereditary. Do Hereditary.
No, because they've seen it. No, they've seen it now though. Like we want to give them some horror, like some different shit. But do Get Out. I'd love to talk about Get Out. I think that'd be a fucking really good speak. You know what I mean? I'd love that.
Yeah, but so what's your guys' rankings of the directors as well as the movies for like all 9 movies, ranking from worst to best? Are either of you ready to do that right now?
I think I could run through
George,
it right now.
let's hear it.
I think of the directors, I think I would go Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele
as one, right? Number 1.
As one. Oh my God. Shit. I'm sorry. I'm not ready, actually.
I'll go first. I have mine pulled up right here. So first I'll do the movies. So in 9th place, last place of the directors, I have Us. Then in 8th place, I have The Witch. And then 7th, The Lighthouse. 6, Nope. 5, Beau is Afraid. 4, Midsummer. Actually, no, flip that. 5, Midsummer. 4, Beau is Afraid. 3, Hereditary. 2, The Northman. And 1, Get Out. And my least favorite of the 3 is Jordan Peele. And then it'll be Robert Eggers and then Ari Aster. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this, I think Ari Aster and Robert Eggers for me are like a tier above Jordan Peele personally. But like I said, Us is my least favorite. That's a 6.7 out of 10, so 3.5 star. And then we immediately jump up to 4 stars with The Witch, and from there on up. So obviously these 3 filmmakers make great movies, but for me, Aster's 1, barely followed by Eggers, and then Peele. Okay,
I think I got mine. Okay, so movie wise, Get Out is my number 1. Then I go Hereditary, and then I go The Lighthouse. Those are 3 5 stars for me. Now we move into the 4.5s. I go The Witch at 4. I go Nope at 5. Midsummer at 6. And then that finishes off the 4.5 stars. I'm sorry, no. Then I go the Us at 7. That finishes off the half stars. And then I go The Northman at 8, which is my 4-star. And then for me personally, but again, I need a rewatch. There's a big drop to the I believe 3 for Beau is Afraid. And then I would go Jordan Peele, Robert Eggers, Ari Aster if I were to rank the 3.
We all have different rankings. That's very interesting.
That's the beauty of film.
Yeah, that's true. Wait, do we have different? Oh, no, yeah. Tyler had Ari Aster first, didn't he?
Yeah.
So I would go, ranking the directors, I'd go Eggers, Peele, Aster. So best to worst. And then I would say the films wise, I'd have Midsummer last, then Beau is Afraid, and then Nope, then Us, then The Northman. 4th place would probably be The Lighthouse right now. 3rd place would be The Witch. And top 2, I think would be the same as George. Hereditary is 2nd, and Get Out at 1st. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Stop copying me, man.
Interesting. So
it is interesting that Robert Eggers
is your favorite, but not in your top 2.
Not in the top 2. Like it's like I think so. To be fair, The Witch, I don't know. The Witch and the Hereditary are very, very close. But like The Northman, The Lighthouse, and The Witch, he's like the most consistent for me. Like I really, really like all of them. Whereas like Peele and Aster have both got a couple where I'm like, you know, I like them. You know what I mean? But yeah, Eggers, Peele, Aster, definitely my 3.